Good morning. This is the Innovation Conversation. I'm Kevin Coupe.
And I'm Tom Furphy.
So, Tom, I wanted this week to talk a little bit about an opinion piece that ran the other day in the New York Times. And it was by the editorial board. So this is the weight of the New York Times, the great gray lady behind it. And the headline was How to Take on the Tech Barons. And the argument was that something has to be done about the technology sector in terms of regulation. And one of the reasons I want to talk about it is it seems to me some of the things they're suggesting might stimulate innovation, but also has the potential of stifling innovation, which is the one thing I think that government doesn't want to do. The first thing they said in this that I actually found sort of objectionable, just in terms of the premise, was there's a line about how record Amazon profits stand in contrast to the bankruptcies of well-known retailers like JCPenney and J.Crew, and Netflix has added millions of new customers this year as movie theaters struggle to stay afloat. And my first reaction was that, well, wait a minute. JCPenney and J.Crew had their own problems beforehand, and JCPenney's been in death throes for years, and it's not Netflix's fault that movie theaters had to close down because of the pandemic and everybody wanted to have Netflix subscriptions.
Yeah, I mean, that anti-competitive Amazon argument has always irked me. They had a better vision for the customer. They had better focus on the customer. They had a better realization of where technology is going. They had a better realization that you could build a better business model, and they did. And now they're getting the benefit of that. And JCPenney and J.Crew and countless other retailers didn't necessarily have that, and they built a business and an infrastructure that was perhaps good at its time, served a need at its time, but was not enduring. And that's too bad. I mean, that happens, but I'm not going to buy in that case that we need to take down Amazon because they've become big in e-commerce retail. They're still not very big compared to overall retail. They're getting there, but they're certainly not, in any kind of super dominant position in overall retail.
Well, it's like I always objected to when cities and towns wanted to pass ordinances to prevent Walmart from coming to town.
Same thing.
Because they would say, well, they're just too big and they're going to hurt small retailers. And my attitude is, well, wait a minute, don't small retailers have the responsibility to compete? Now,
absolutely.
I think you got to, now that's not to say that towns should give Walmart, tax abatements.
Right.
I think that's crazy. But I think you got to let them into town. Well, New York City doesn't allow Walmart on the island of Manhattan. They've got Target, they've got Home Depot, they've got, all sorts of other big box stores, but Walmart's not allowed.
I mean, in a small town, right? If you're the operator of a shop, if you're the operator of a shop and the only reason you can be successful is because you can charge a high price, or you can charge a price that would be, dramatically beaten by competition, and you don't provide enough other value to your customer to keep the customer there, and they go to that competitor, well, then that's too bad. Right. You need to think about your offering to your customer and how you can provide them value, beyond simply access to stuff. Now, access to stuff certainly has to be a part of the equation, but, provide other services or other amenities to your customer to be able to serve them in ways that keep them coming.
That said, I mean, the Times does make the legitimate point that there is growing consumer resentment of technologists. And I think in some ways, and they're always talking about the big four, right? Google, Facebook, right, Amazon, and Apple. And I do think that, I think the part of the reason is that, part of it is because some of those companies do sort of abuse their access to consumers.
Oh, yeah.
I also think they don't necessarily explain themselves particularly well, which I think is also important for traditional retailers. It gives them the opportunity to do one of two, well, maybe to do both things. First of all, you can exploit the fact that there's consumer resentment of technology companies, number one. But at the same time, if you are going to adapt technology to help your business model, it's incumbent on you to explain the consumer benefit.
Absolutely. I'm not going to go into this. This might be a future innovation conversation topic, but did you have a chance to watch The Social Experiment?
I have not yet.
Okay, watch that at some point, and then we'll do another innovation conversation on that, because it does a really good job at explaining how the algorithms work in these companies and the early recognition of how destructive they can become. These companies knew early on where they could head with these and the problems they could get themselves into. So I think the overall, you know, the overall consumer resentment toward these is well founded. You know, I find myself, and I don't spend a lot of time on social media, I find myself feeling exploited by it. And, you know, it doesn't, you know, it's not providing me value when clearly the stream of information I'm getting is based on stuff I've clicked on before, or stuff that, you know, maybe my friends are interested in, or my friends have a debate about. You know, to me, you know, I just feel like that's not necessarily benefiting me. To some level, it may have been, but I think it's gone too far. And, you know, I think when you leverage customers' private information, you know, really ultimately to their detriment, or, you know, certainly not to their benefit, I think you've gone too far. And I do think a lot of these platforms have gone too far.
Yeah, I mean, if you can explain, again, if it's relevant,
Yeah.
if it's relevant, that's a good thing. It's funny. You know, my wife and I have this argument all the time. Not argument, but we talk about this all the time. I mean, she finds the idea if she looks at a pair of shoes and then it continues to pop up, she finds that really annoying. It's like, I looked at them, I didn't buy them, leave me alone. I sort of understand the rationale behind it, and so it doesn't really bother me as long as they're showing me something that's relevant to what I'm interested in. I'm okay with that. I just go past it.
Yeah.
And you get lots of stuff you're not interested in, that it becomes really annoying. And God knows we are recording this on election day. This will be posted the day after election day. I think we're all going to be happy to stop getting things from various political parties, right?
Yeah.
It's like, I don't vote in Iowa. Why are you sending me things? You know,
Totally.
but I do think that it seems to me, I mean, you have a company, Replenium, which
Yep.
is an automatic replenishment business. And it seems to me that as retailers adopt Replenium, which is a direct competitive answer in so many ways to Subscribe and Save, which has become an enormous business for Amazon, it seems to me that it's incumbent on those retailers, and you're gonna help them do this, I assume, help explain to customers why this is in their benefit. It's not like they're going to be tracking things that customers don't want tracked. Customers are going to be opting in, and there's a compelling message and story to be told.
Yeah, I think, yes, certainly as retailers are adopting Replenium, this is a new way to shop for a lot of folks. And it's even beyond Subscribe and Save. So, you know, there is definitely some education that has to go with that. It's really important to get that out in front of the customer. But then it's really about just providing the customer visibility and control, right? You know, let them opt into replenishment of products, and we're going to suggest other products to them based on maybe things they bought in the past, maybe things that similar customers have bought, maybe things that manufacturer recommends you might want if you bought that product. You just can't go overboard with that. You just have to be thoughtful. The data has to show you back or us back that this is effective, and it has to show the customer that you provided me value by giving me that, and you know, I feel as though I'm in control of it, and you're not overwhelming me. If you start overwhelming, you start pushing it too far, you're going to turn the customer off. You're going to make them rightfully feel exploited, and that's just a place you just don't want to go. So keep it tight, keep it relevant, and not only let them know up front how you use their information, but remind them ongoing. You know, I think that's more than a nice gesture as a tech company to say, hey, we just wanted to remind you, you know, that we're using your information this way, and thank you for sharing, and we hope you find the service valuable. You know, and if not, please provide feedback.
So how do you feel about Section 230, which for our audience is, just to make sure everybody is on the same page, Section 230 is the part of the federal code, federal law, that says that basically online platforms are A, responsible for policing themselves, and B, are not held liable for things that appear on their platform that did not originate with them.
It's a tough one. I get the whole kind of free speech, open platform, you know, allowing people to be individuals and share their opinions, you know, the way that they may want to share them. It feels like there should maybe be better customer tools to allow if I could be on a social media platform and I could declare what kind of stuff I want to see and don't see, perhaps. Um, but there has to be some level of responsibility on these platforms, particularly when you talk about manipulating, customers, and you look at even what's happening with like kids and the way social media is impacting, kids' lives over, through influential years. And, to say that, a platform doesn't have any responsibility for allowing, that type of information to be shared and that type of environment to be created is just not right. So I think there has to be some level of, they need to be better at self-regulating. But then I do think, it is a governmental responsibility, and well within their rights, to establish some pretty good rules around that. Not necessarily to censor, but just to provide a, just a more, reasonable environment, and one that is more transparent to users, and users are more in control.
It does sound, I think, though, based on my reading, is this horse may be out of the barn, that it's one of the rare things that the Democrats and Republicans seem to agree on at this point, is that Section 230 has to either be disposed of or amended, because I think the too many big technology companies, I think they think mostly of, I think they're really focused on Google and Facebook in this area,
Right.
just have not stepped up and done the kinds of things they need to do. And,
yeah, I would agree with that.
So, and then the last question, if we're going to talk about government, I was astounded by this number. The fact that there's 42 million Americans do not have access to broadband in 2020, coming up on 2021. I mean, and that's amazing. It's like almost a seventh of the country. And
these are people that can't access the innovation conversation.
Yeah, well, that alone is a reason to lay the pipe.
No, not to make light of it. It is a significant issue.
I know, and it's largely because the companies that make money on providing broadband can't make enough money providing it to certain areas of the country, so they don't bother. I mean, it seems to me that I'd be perfectly happy to take the political stance that if you're going to eliminate Section 230, you have to simultaneously make sure you create the technology so 100% of the population has access to broadband. If only from a competitive point of view, if you're being raised in a town that does not have access to broadband, your likelihood in terms of being able to maximize your own abilities and education are significantly diminished.
Oh, yeah. I mean, it creates competitive imbalances for sure within our country, and it also puts our country at a competitive disadvantage versus countries that have full broadband access. I don't know what the cost would be to provide that, but to me, given all of the types of expenditures that a government can be faced with, spending on this infrastructure, it seems that it would be responsible and it would be good ROI. And I would have to think that most taxpayers have presented, a cogent argument as to why we should all be investing in that. I think people would step up, be willing to invest in that.
I think you can make the argument it's at least as important, or as important as making sure bridges don't fall down. Right? I mean,
yeah.
It's the same. It's a different venue, but it is as important. And the good news, I suppose, is, but it'll raise other questions, is that the likes of Amazon and Google and Tesla are engaged in the act of putting so many satellites over the globe that will provide a kind of broadband. It's going to bump into each other at some point.
Yeah.
So there'll be questions about, well, how are they using the data that they get? But
yeah,
that's one answer to the problem.
That's also 42 million more Americans than Amazon can now reach.
Well, I don't think anybody's arguing that Amazon is being altruistic by putting satellites over the globe that can enable broadband. I mean, I think.
Yeah, well, there's so many ways in the Amazon business that's important. Their business is so digital across everything they do that having that infrastructure is important to them.
Well, they have trucks, they have planes, and they have drones. One way or the other, no matter where you are, they will be able to reach you.
And Jeff is working on getting into space.
Yes. Well, I'm telling you, it'll be You know, the transporter from Star Trek, that will happen at some point. You know, there's somewhere in Seattle, there's an office where he has said, make this, figure out how to make this work.
You know, back in the day, it was really cool and brave to be a test pilot. I would not know that I want to be a test pilot for that.
You know, yeah. The first person to test the transporter will be roughly as brave. Where did I read? Somewhere somebody once said that one of the bravest people on the planet in history had to be the first person who tasted milk. Because think about where.
That's true. Yeah,
right?
True that. Absolutely.
That's something we all take for granted now, but you know, anyway.
Yep.
Okay, well, listen, I've got to watch The Social Experiment. So that's,
Yeah.
and maybe we'll talk about that in the next innovation conversation. Sounds good. Anyway, well, that's it for this edition of the innovation conversation. I'm Kevin Coupe.
And I'm Tom Furphy.
We'll see you next time, everybody.